At this point in a program, a recorded voice comes on and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, please find and silence your cell phones. Thank you." Welcome. My name is John Tanberg, and I was a friend of Doug's for nearly 55 years. And as you will see, that is not the record span for such friendships. As I look out, I can only say, wow, what a rich and varied bunch you are. And that's because of Doug. Doug informed, entertained, engaged such a wide swath of people. It is so fitting that this memorial is held on the MSU campus and what is now called the Hanson Theater. To actors of my generation, it was simply the CA, stood for the shorthand for the Center for the Arts. A perhaps unnecessary reminder, we're in a theater, not a church, and you will see some fine performances during this program. Applause is welcomed. The CA Auditorium, the perfect venue. It was here where Doug began his storied acting career. And you'll hear next from a couple of other fine actors who shared this stage with him. The first of these, Steve Poitras, AKA Poiter, is known for many roles, especially that of Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. I once met a couple in Fargo who had seen the Israeli actor Chaim Topol play the role in Tel Aviv, and they told me straight up, Poiter was better. Let me welcome to the stage, Steve Poitras.
Thank you, John. Another of my lifetime friends who's helped me in many ways. Doug would be wonderfully overwhelmed by this showing of love for him. Who didn't love, respect, admire, enjoy Doug Hamilton? Let me get my glasses out. I still can't see. Gordy Richardson, some of you may know from the long time ran the VIP. Gordy lives in my neighborhood, and we became bicycle riding buddies a few years ago, and we were out virtually every day when it's nice. And just earlier this week, Gordy says to me, "So, have you got any notes together about Doug yet?" "Well, sort of," I said. And Gordy says, "Hey, I know. Why don't you write a play about him? You could call it Hamilton." I thought I'd jump on that before anybody else did today. There's, I got a little sidebar. You know, I'm supposed to hold it to 3 minutes. I'll try here. There's a country song that George Jones did many years ago, "Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes?" Who's gonna fill Doug's shoes? And I remember the four sons, the brothers, speaking so eloquently at the service for Roger, and King, followed by Doug, followed by Dennis, followed by Patrick, also eloquent, talking about, and I believe, King, yours had to do with the theme, who's going to fill your dad's shoes, and you were actually, I don't know, at that time, wearing a pair of your dad's shoes. Yeah. Whoa. All right, so Doug and I were friends for about 55 years. I think we met the Straw Hat summer of '67 on this stage. I was lucky enough to be in a number of shows with Doug. But he was a friend in plays, in broadcasting, in flood fighting, and in just having a whole lot of fun. Talent, brilliance, discipline, hard work, and yet friendliness, kindness always. Wholly adequate. Remember that? Ask Doug how he was doing, and he often replied, "Wholly adequate." Well, of course, Doug was always a whole lot more than adequate in everything he did, approaching everything with gusto. Gusto and preparation. Talking with Tucker Lucas earlier this week, they were in Hamlet together. Tucker played Hamlet, and Doug was Claudius. So I'm talking with Tucker, and I said, "Any overall memories of Doug?" And he said, "Well, as that was a Theater B production, as they met for their very first rehearsal of Hamlet, he said, Doug was already memorized. There, that reflects the kind of preparation, the conscientiousness that Doug always had. He played Claudius in that production. I was lucky enough to be in him with a few on this very stage, Inherit the Wind, Irma La Douce, Hamp, Fiddler on the Roof. Doug was a son, so he was a bottle dancer. And talking with him just a couple of weeks ago, well, no, it's more than that, but recently, and on the phone. And I remember the bottle dance. He said, yes. And he said, we didn't Velcro the bottles, so they were, doing it straight up. And I just remember that I'd be watching just off the side, and my knees would ache for them. That was tough stepping they did, those bottle dancers. All right. Okay, where am I at? Back in 1994, I think it was, Doug and I did a series of 2-character sketches over here on the Gaiety stage called Good Evening. We had a blast with that. And more recently, a few years ago, we were in a production called I Hate Hamlet at the Fargo Community Theater, in which Doug played the ghost of John Barrymore. And I think that couple from Israel said they'd never seen it done better. But I particularly remember, and any of you who are fans of theater, if you saw Theater B's production, it goes back to 2010, of The Seafarer. 5 standout people in that show, Mark Dillon, Hardy Koenig, Scott Horvick, Jeff Rondo, and Doug. It's brilliant. It ranks as perhaps the best thing I've ever seen in theater on any level, anywhere. It was simply wonderful. And another one, and somebody else has brought this one up, when it was with, I think it might have been a Straw Hat production of Our Town, and he was asked to play the narrator, the stage manager. And I remember right up here, I mean, I was always as big a fan of Doug's acting as anybody, but every once in a while he'd do something that would just knock me. And he's standing there, he says, he said something to the effect, you're 20, 21, and then you're 70 and a lawyer. And he did a gesture, and I'm not doing it, but he was wonderful. He was just wonderful. Okay, I'm getting there. Doug was proud to carry his actor's equity card for 50-odd years. So others here today will testify to his talent and professionalism in the world of broadcast journalism. I would just say Doug was about the best interviewer ever. And I could always count him as a friend. Some of you have perhaps heard this tale. In the aftermath of the flood of 1997, our home was hit really hard. Doug put in 3 full days helping Sue and me clean out our ravaged basement. And Sue remembers how, as we were getting down to the end, Doug really enjoyed running the squeegee over the floor in the last stages of cleanup, and now I can liken it. It was definitely a psychological catharsis for both of us. Doug was also among the funnest and funniest people I've ever known. He brought great gusto to the art of having a good time. Rock Lake Lobster Bakes, Rock Lake Pig Bake, Halloween parties. It was always a treat to spend some time with Doug. Out in Montana, where I worked in radio way back, remember a guy passing along, he said he heard a rancher, probably referring to some hired help or a cowboy, said, he was a heck of a hand. Well, I'd like to say that about it. He was a heck of a hand. He really was. And at the close of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Mark Antony is speaking about Brutus. And I think these brief lines can refer to Doug as well. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. Doug was a man for all seasons, irreplaceable.
Thank you, Poiter. That was exactly 3 minutes. Would I lie? Another close friend of Doug's, very familiar to FM actors and theater goers in the mid and later 60s, is Mike Kolba. It's possible you will not recognize Mike out of costume, because as an actor, Mike was a kind of shape shifter. Once in costume, he transformed into Francisco Pizarro in Royal Hunt of the Sun. And in costume, he was the bumbling pirate Smee in Peter Pan. And now, he's here. Come on up, Mike.
Jeez. Now look, I'm an old man. After the Poiter, I got nothing. You know, you've heard about Doug. Doug, he was a wonderful actor, but he was also a wonderful person. And you can't say that about a lot of actors. So Doug looked about 12 when he came here and was a freshman, but he soon enough, he convinced Dr. Hansen that he knew what he was doing. He was always a bit precocious. I was a couple of years older, but Doug was a lot more street smart than I was. So thanks for the stuff off stage, Doug. Anyway, I'm just going to read now the only duet that we ever sang together. This was 54, 55 years ago. It was in West Side Story, and Doug was Baby John. I was Action, and so together we sang, "When you're a jet, if the spit hits the fan, you've got your brothers around, you're a family man. You're never alone, you're never disconnected, you're home with your own. When company's expected, you're well protected. When you're a jet, you're the top cat in town, you're the gold medal kid with a heavyweight crown. When you're a jet, you're the swingin'est thing. Little boy, you're a man. Little man, you're a king." So that's it. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mike. I often call Mike Max because when I first met him, he was doing lip sync in a band that wasn't even good at lip sync. But, but he had Max written on his cardboard guitar. I'm having a particular deja vu moment right now on this stage. In 1968, Doug, Steve, Mike, and I played principal roles in Irma la Douce. We were the Mecs, that's pimps in French slang. The four of us endured 18 measures of high kicks in a song called Dites donc. It was a kind of torture. Somebody well familiar with Doug's later acting performances is Nick Caspari. Nick starred with Doug in Tuesdays with Morrie, an absolutely marvelous show. Nick will now perform a selection from that play. Please welcome Nick to the stage.
A little preamble here. I've had the honor and privilege to share the stage with Doug Hamilton just twice in my acting career. He's a tremendous talent, as many are going to say, and a steadfast professional. I remember being in absolute awe from our very first table read. Doug naturally inspired everyone to strive for their absolute best work. The last production that we did together was Tuesdays with Morrie. It was an experience I will never forget, and a memory I will forever endeavor to deserve. Here is a cutting from Tuesdays with Morrie. You know what I've been doing all this time here, Morrie? I was keeping you to myself. Morrie, in my world, there's no difference between weekdays and weekends. There's no end. There's no beginning. But ever since I started coming to you on Tuesdays, there's form. I'm excited when I get on the plane to come to you, and sometimes when I get home from being with you, I'm sad or I'm quiet. But I'm better. When I'm here, there's still time. There's still hope. And I like myself better when I'm with you. I'm going to lose you, and I'm afraid. I don't know how to say goodbye. I love you, Maury. I always have. We'll see you next Tuesday. 2 days later, Maury stopped breathing. Charlotte kept the funeral small as Maury wanted, and I flew back to Detroit. The class was over. All the way home, I kept hearing Maury's voice. You talk, I'll listen. And in that little phrase, I finally figured out what Maury knew that I didn't. If you lead your life, as Maury did, with people as the priority, giving of yourself, making memories, then when you die, you're never really gone. You live inside the hearts of everyone you've ever touched. So when you're walking alone or when they're playing the piano that you taught them to play, they can hear everything you've ever given them. The next time that I went to the cemetery, I brought a blanket and some food and laid out a picnic. You talk, I'll listen. I tried doing just that, and to my surprise, the conversation felt almost natural. I realized why. It was a Tuesday.
Nick, that was fabulous. Let's have another quick round. Next up is John Kenneth Johnson, one of those lucky folks who have known, or who did know, Doug more than 55 years. John has more visa stamps to more out-of-the-way places than anybody I know. A conversation with John might go something like this. Well, how did you find Bhutan? And they'd say, well, I was in Nepal, so I just took a right. John?
I don't know, was it Spider who came up with the order that we would speak in? And I just want to, wherever he is, thanks for putting me behind three wonderful actors. I'm not an actor, and I'm not wonderful, as you'll soon find out. But I would like to reminisce a little bit about some time we spent with Doug. Not long ago. Doug visited us twice while we lived in Singapore. On his second trip, he and I ventured to the Golden Triangle of Thailand and slept in huts high above the misty jungle hills. Without electricity at night, it was not ideal for Doug and his CPAP machine. Nonetheless, each morning, Doug declared himself rested, if a little bleary, and ready to roam as we breakfasted on our banana waffles and Asia's best coffee. It was a long breakfast. On another visit, Doug accompanied us to the Vietnamese island of Phu Quoc, out in the Gulf of Thailand. Eager to taste the island's culture close up, we and Jenny and our daughter Phoebe and our friend Rob rented motor scooters for the day. We might have given Doug better instructions before we all took off on our scooters for our island tour. We showed him the basics, you know, the accelerator, the gears, the brakes. But honestly, we spent precious little time on how to operate them. We sped off down the sandy road with Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild playing in our heads. We might have better prepared Doug. On the first steepish downhill, he was clearly going too fast. His white-knuckle grasp on the handle grips never wavered. But that was his only connection to the machine. For a moment, he soared, mostly untethered, elegantly parallel to the ground, speeding beneath. But he soared only for a moment. Discombobulated, he finally slowed and came to a zigzaggy stop, upright, miraculously, on the dusty road. Are you all right? Are you okay? Should we can this? Should we cancel the whole day? We helpfully inquired. Straightening his glasses, smiling sheepishly, he declared, I think I got this. Ready to ride once more, unimpeded by good sense, our brave explorer set off with a grin, permanently in place. Always keen, always keen to travel, here he was, living the life. What larks. Over sundowners, eager to recount the day's adventure to anyone that would listen, it was us and we had been there, but never mind. Our BFF launched colorfully into the day's highlights. And like Maury, he talked and we listened. Safe travels, good friend.
John Kenneth, there's a place for you on any stage. Very nice. Sandy Buttweiler's lovely voice earned her devoted audiences at KFGO, WDAY, and WCCO. As a matter of fact, when MSUM introduced telephone registration, I recorded Sandy's smooth, soothing voice to say, among other messages, I'm sorry, that class is closed. Sandy?
Thanks, John. You know, when I saw the program, I thought, all I could think of was, thank God I'm not following his youngest brother, Patrick. That's the one you don't want to really follow. No offense, John, you were great, but you don't want to follow Patrick. I'm sorry. King, Jennifer, Dennis and Sherry, Pat and Jay. How I think most of us probably feel like, did this really happen? Are we really here? Did this really happen? And as we know, it did. Deb, lovely Deb, thank you for loving and caring for Doug and for being with him and by his side through it all. Really, thank you from the bottom of my heart and my family's heart. Ben has suffered a couple of earth-shattering events, obviously. This one, another earth-shattering event. I'm sorry, I was so ready for this. No, I'm not, but you've just handled it with grace and courage and strength and love for everyone around you, making sure that people felt a part of things, and I'm so proud of you. I've never been more proud of you and Lindsay. We were married for 25 years. We were together for 31, and they were full of the most laughs I've ever had in my life. I laughed every day. I had fun every day. I had to read lines with him from the Seafarer. By the way, in the Seafarer, there's 258 F-bombs in that play. Remember that? He was in so many performances that just were, when he saw Our Town and when my brother-in-law saw Our Town, he came home and he said, it completely changed my life. So we met in the spring of 1986, and we met through the Children's Miracle Network. And we were hosts for some 20 years of that. And we were doing pretty good, and it was time to meet the parents, one of those. I don't know, a lot of you have met my dad, but maybe not all of you, but he's kind of a gruff sports guy. And so I thought, oh, how am I going to explain this to my dad? My new boyfriend, well, he has a master's in fine arts, and, you know, he just got done working 3 years at NPR, and he, let's see, what else could I say? I mean, just the things went on and on and on. He acted at the Guthrie, for heaven's sakes. And so I thought, oh, what are we going to do? My dad's all sports, right? So the first time we watch a football game, you know, Doug really wants to impress him. So some pass was really good, and Doug would be, technically, that was a wonderful pass. Don't you think, Elmer? Yes. And you know, that quarterback, that was a very well thought out pass. Don't you think, Elmer? And so and then he would inappropriately like cheer really loud. So it'd be like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? But they ended up adoring each other and loving each other. At baseball games, it would be like, batter, batter, batter. Now you watch for that pitch. We'll be right here with you. You wait for the right pitch and we'll get this game underway. Right, Elmer? Oh, yes, Doug, absolutely. He was first diagnosed with cancer in 2006, in December. He had surgery, major surgery. He wasn't out of my sight for 6 weeks. And in 6 weeks, we were going on one of our Mexico vacations with Nancy and Jergy and Paul and Jack and Doug and I. We hosted. So when Doug got off the airplane that day, or when we were at the airport, everyone was looking at him like, oh my goodness, he was sort of, he was still really in pain, and he was kind of hunched over, and he was, he looked grayer than normal, and he looked sort of really tired, and everyone was worried about him. Well, when we got there, he and the boys decided they were going to go to a Rick's Bar, which was in Negril. Packed his bag, got him all ready to go, just like he was going to kindergarten for the first day, He's going to be with these hoodlums, and I have to let him go with these hoodlums. So the ladies and I are down at the beach. We walk up. Pretty soon Paul Jurgen says to me, so have you seen Cliff? I said, Cliff? Who the hell is Cliff? And I said, I don't know. Who's Cliff? Well, Cliff will be down any minute. I'm like, what's with Cliff? Pretty soon the travelers were coming back, and they're looking at me like in dread almost, and fear. And I'm like, what is going on? So Jergy finally tells me that, well, he dove. He took a 35-foot dive at Rick's and 6 weeks post-op. And he took a dive. That's where the Cliff came from. So then they're all talking to me about this, and they thought I'd be so upset, and I'd be so worried, and I'd be so concerned. And I was like, well, he's a grown man, and he's been known to make good decisions, and so I'm fine, Jack even came over by me and sat down, and I looked at him, and he said, San, I said, Doug, is you sure this is something you want to do? And Doug said he'd walk up and down the cliffs to see where he was going to jump. And so he said, I'm going to keep my feet together, I'm going to keep my hands to my side, and I'm going to go in feet first, and my feet will, and I won't, destroy 6-week post-op, right? And when he came out of the elevator that night, we left, he looked like he was much older than he was. And when he walked out of the elevator that night, he was 57 years old again. And he was full of life, and he was full of happiness that he was able to do that. There's something that I want to read for you. I found this and it really hit home. We talk about them, not because we're stuck or because we haven't moved on, but we talk about them because we are theirs, and they are ours, and no passage of time will ever change that. He'll always be Uncle Doug in the Buttweiler and the Sorensen family. He's beloved by all of us. He did the eulogy for a woman named Carol Gady, who the stage is named after, Gady Stage. And that day I had people come up to me all day long saying, oh, Doug did this eulogy. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And he ended it with, welcome to Living Memories. So, Doug, welcome to Living Memories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, brave Sandy. We all know Robin Hubner from local TV and, of course, the Forum. She was known earlier as an Olympic caliber gymnast. Robin, we couldn't find a balance beam, so you're just going to have to stand up here and talk like the rest of us. Robin, please vault upstage.
Getting up to speak is enough. I don't need a balance beam. I don't need that extra challenge. Thank you. To be an excellent news anchor requires particular skills and attributes. A certain amount of intellect, a community and broad worldview of things, knowing a lot about a lot of different things and being willing to learn even more, an ability to write, to ask questions, to act on your feet, think on your feet, and the ability to be your genuine self while you're on the air so people know what they're getting. Missing a few of those attributes and you'd still be a pretty good news anchor. But Doug, he had every single one of them in spades. I was lucky enough to co-anchor the 10 o'clock news with him for a number of years in the early 90s. And he was professional, prepared, and unflappable. I remember the time watching, he did the 5 o'clock news solo, and I was sitting at my desk working on the 6 o'clock news, and the monitor was here like you always kind of paid attention to the other newscasts, and he was about to start the headline teases where, you know, you give a couple snippets of stories that are coming up. And right before this happened, Doug evidently had a terrible coughing jag, just awful, and it was seconds before he was to go on the air, so there was no time to put in another commercial break or give him a little bit of extra time to regroup. So when the on-air light came on, here was Doug. Coming up on News 11, the news. It might have been the best tease ever because people were probably going to stay tuned for like, is he going to get his voice back to do the rest of the newscast? But he could find his way out of any sticky situation on the air, and there always were some. One thing that takes getting used to as a TV news anchor or any on-air person is wearing an earpiece where you get the cues from your director. And usually the cues are short and direct and, you know, but sometimes they have to be a little more detailed in order to get some important information, like a live shot crashed or we have to switch around a bunch of stories. And our friend Jeff Petrick, who was directing newscasts then, he told me, I swear I could have recited the preamble to him in his earpiece when he was on the air talking live, and he wouldn't skip a beat. And that was Doug all the way. Then there was his vocabulary, of course. My good friend Lisa Gebhardt Black, who was the anchor before me on News 11, said that simple words for Doug were just not adequate. Instead of someone traveling the world, they circumnavigated the globe. Instead of the government making drastic moves, it was draconian measures. I had to look that one up, I know I did. He would say something and you'd get the dictionary out later in the day when he wasn't around. And Poiter mentioned his ability to interview. He was the best. It does take great skill to do that because you have to listen, you have to ask the things that will bring about a thoughtful and honest response, and that's not an easy thing to do. He could interview with ease politicians, professors, artists, athletes, authors, children. Whether it was on a newscast, his primetime news hour that he did, High School Challenge, the Kids Show, the Children's Miracle Network, he always took the right tone. What you might not know, though, is, and I was reminded of this recently because someone sent me a little clip in an email, that he once interviewed Mr. Potato on his newscast. So there was Mr. Potato Head sitting in the chair across from Doug, sitting still and stoic, with Doug saying things like, "We've talked with some vegetables before, but you're a real vegetable." And you've written a book called My Story, Mr. Potato. How did you get to the root of it? You can find it on YouTube. It's very cute. I think a lot of that versatility obviously came from his acting background and all of the many things that he did over the years. And that was helpful for other aspects of the news business. Pam Petrick, who was creative services director at the time, loved Doug's approach to recording promotional videos. She told me, I could count on Doug to deliver every line and every promo just as I had envisioned. One take, always one take. He made it look easy, even though we know it wasn't by any stretch. And he did it all with grace, even when dealt with an unfair and really awful disease. Through the years, you'd ask Doug, how are you? And I remember a little differently then. Wholly adequate, right, Pointer? To me, I remember him saying, hunky dang dory. There was that too, right? I'm not misremembering that. Hunky dang dory, or it might have been hunky damn dory if he was feeling spicy. He talked about his positive outlook on life on the show Main Street that he hosted on Prairie Public last October, I think it was, and Ashley Thornburg was asking him about that positive outlook, and he said, I've always been an optimist. He said, why waste a day or an hour, for that matter, being a pessimist? You only get so much time. And I sure wish he had more time. So well-deserved to live into a ripe old age. For him, for his family, his loved ones, and then selfishly for us too. We wished we could have him around a lot longer. Gonna miss him.
Thank you, Robin. Wow, is this particular segment well-timed? Doug was a force in theater and on TV, but he was also a tremendous presence in radio. It may have been his greatest medium, because in radio, he could bring all of his informed background and laser focus to skilled questioning as an interviewer. I once heard a segment of Doug's show, Main Street, and he was interviewing some guy out in western North Dakota. This guy had been tasked with implementing some aspect of a new federal program, the Affordable Care Act. And Doug right away sets in asking well-prepared, penetrating questions. Finally, the poor guy, it's radio, but you could feel the shrug, said, you obviously know a lot more about this than I do. Why don't you just tell me some more about what you figured out, and I'll simply agree with you. The mention of Main Street is the cue to bring Ashley Thornburg on stage. Ashley was a strong partner for Doug in North Dakota Public Radio's Main Street, 91.9. Ashley, the mic is yours.
So I worked with Doug for nearly 10 years. Not quite the same as being friends for 55 or 60 years. But it was the last microphone that he ever manned. And when the job was posted, I also applied for this job. And I found out that he was applying. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. This is Doug Hamilton. But as it happened, the job was broken into two parts. And we started on Main Street on the same day. And I was in my 20s. And he was Doug Hamilton. And I was trying so hard to be paying attention on this office tour. And I kept sitting there thinking, what the hell am I doing in this room? Again, this is Doug Hamilton. Like what space What crack in the space-time continuum allowed me to work, allowed me even to be in the same room as someone that I had grown up watching. And I wanted really badly to impress him. And I knew that he was an actor. I knew that he was a longtime journalist. And it was radio, it's all voice. And my nickname at the time by my husband was Pippi McSqueak. And so I wanted tips, actor-y tips on how to not sound so in my 20s. And so I looked at him and I said, what should I do with my voice? And he didn't miss a beat at all. He just looked at me and he said, why don't you try sounding like yourself? He never doubted that it was okay for me to be in that room. And we've heard so much today about all the things that he did and all the things that he was. The Bush Fellowship, the being on the Guthrie, the motorcycle riding. But I want to talk about a few of the things that he never was, or that he never did. I never saw him flustered, not once. And we tried. We're a small organization. We would give him 7 interviews in one day. And it would be a politician, and it would be somebody talking about food, and it would be a book about airplanes, and it would be a psychologist, and he would be in that room, step for step, holding space for whoever that was. We rewrote the song, You Can Call Me Al, to be about pledge. It's public radio, we're always asking for money. And he just walked in the room. And it didn't matter how dumb I knew that we were gonna look. He did it. And he was fantastic. He just took that fake saxophone and he could play it. And then he could go right on the air and talk to a politician. We asked him one time to be a therapist for a different radio spot, sort of a Tony Soprano goes to this therapist. And he never said, what now? He would just do it. He never tried to talk me out of a crazy idea. He never pointed out that my questions on Main Street, let's just say, meandered. Well, he always got to the point. He always trusted that I would get there. And towards the end, he was slowing down a little. I didn't think that much of it. By then he was 70, and he had certainly deserved to take a little time away from the studio. And then one day, he called in sick. And then it was a week. And now here we are. And I think back on those times that he was slowing down. He had been sick. And we didn't do it. We didn't know. Because the absolute one thing that he never, ever did was complain. He absolutely always brought the very best of himself to any interview that he did.
Thank you, Ashley. And you know you're not alone. those of us who knew Doug for 50-plus years still had those moments. Wow, I'm here with Doug Hamilton. He was a presence. Charlie Johnson is always a wonderful communicator. Charlie was a news anchor, and at KXJB and KVLY was also the station manager. Relative newcomers to Fargo-Moorhead will know Charlie as the president of the FM Convention and Visitors Bureau. Habitués of the Sons of Norway will know Charlie as a member of the band The Moving Parts. Charlie, the red light is on.
So, Robin already referenced this, but I think we should all say it together, those of you who, if you were Doug and we said, how are you doing today, what would he say? Count of three. 1, 2, 3. Hunky damn dory. There you go. So, yeah, so here's a sweet story. I guess it's more bittersweet. Spider left the dirty work to me. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Spider. You get to tell the bad story. Anyway, it's not, though. It will end well. Starting in late '88, I was Doug's boss, right? Robin, of course, remembers this. It was then KTHI Channel 11, right? And I do know how to get through scripts quickly, so I'm going to try to make this in my 3 minutes. So anyway, I had come over from KX4 to take over as news director and establish a new 6 p.m. newscast, which they'd never had before. That plan worked great. Doug would keep the 5 and 10 p.m. shows. We revamped the 5 to include an interview segment, which, of course, as you already know from what everybody else has been saying, played to his immense talents. Lisa Gebhardt Black first, and then Robin co-anchored with me at 6 and Doug at 10. It worked great. I got to go home at 6:30. It was great. It also allowed me for the first time in my career to act as a control room producer on election nights, which was the bomb. I really liked it. I didn't think I would, but I did. No offense to our competitors at the time, because they were all wonderful. I always thought Doug was really the only other news anchor in town who I thought had more interest in and more knowledge of politics, both nationally, statewide, and locally than I did. So it was kind of an election night partnership made in heaven. And Robin already mentioned our friend Jeff Petrick, who I know is watching. Petey. You put him in as the director and get to be in the control room with him, and you kind of had the makings of a TV sitcom going on in the control room. But I digress, and it would be off color. So anyway, some of the things he said in our ear, ooh. Yeah. So anyway, that went, swimmingly until the station was sold to new owners in 1995. And as new owners in television, they could use their, if you work in television, you know how it's pretty true in any business, I guess, but television is very strict about this. But when you buy a station, you get this one-time only, I only have to hire the current staff I want, sort of get out of jail free card with no, you don't have to have any concerns about any kind of discrimination, age, gender, whatever. You just get to say, I'll hire that person, I'm not hiring that person. So you know where this is going. They wanted me to go back to the 10 o'clock show and let Doug go, along with a couple of other of our longtime newsroom colleagues. I just flashed on this slight interspersement here. The station manager at the time of this was supposed to be there to deliver all this news, but he was on vacation. So I got to do it. Anyway, I would have done this part anyway. So anyway, I tried to talk them out of it. I said, sure, I'll take over the 10, but we should keep Doug. He brings so much, and we could think of other things to do. For a long time, I wanted to do a 6:30 show that he would have been perfect for, sort of like a mini Nightline, And then I saw, finally, after I left there, they did it, and it turned into Point of View. Whatever. That was not what I had in mind. So anyway, in the end, the compromise they made for me, which I knew he would say no to, was, well, you can offer him the weekends at a greatly reduced salary rate. And I'm like, okay. So I called him up. I went over to the house. Of course, I knew he was going to say no. I laid out the option, because there really was only one, you know, and of course he said no thanks. I apologized 500 or 600 times. As now I cried and he didn't. So it crushed him, of course, and don't worry, I'm going to pull it together, Porter. I see you staring at me. You're so judgmental.
There's a lot to be judged there.
There is, yes, thank you. I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you being there. Oh, thank you. Deb has Kleenex. Good, thank you. Thank you. You should just leave that up here, probably. Anyway, the upshot is, of course, we remained friends because that's the way Doug was. So, it was a tough thing to do. So anyway, one more thing, we're going to do this together. And some of you know this, too. Not only did he often say the same thing when we greeted him, but he always said the same thing when he left, right? Don't get ahead of me. Sorry, some of you are going to get ahead of me. So I want you to say it on 3. So when Doug was leaving, time to go, see you next time, he would always say, 1, 2, 3, y'all be bad now.
Thank you, Charlie. You know, there ain't never anything wrong with honest, true emotion. Thank you, Charlie. Now, you got a treat. Pat Lennertz is a familiar performer in all sorts of local boy bands. You will know him because he's in nearly all of them. Pat is an incredibly versatile performer, equally at home in singing reggae, Little Feat, or John Prine. Pat, please bring your magic to Somewhere Over the Rainbow and What a Wonderful World.
You know, I grew up on the 90s KTHI, and it's just a privilege to be here today and an honor. I got to play for Doug and many of you over the years downtown, as I've been playing for about 25 years. So this is wonderful. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to, why can't I see trees of green, red roses too, watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, What a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the brightest of day and the darkest of night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? What they're really saying is, I love you, or hunky damn Dory. Yeah. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we ever known. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh why, and somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. Thank you. Also, side note, I've been to Negril about 7 times, and I've seen Rick's Cafe, and I would never jump off that today in any state, in any whatever. So that's pretty amazing.
Thank you, Pat. Isn't he something? Pat, I got to apologize. I botched the first line of your introduction. I meant to say bar bands, not boy bands. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Another, perhaps not widely known facet of Doug's persona was his love of visual art and local artists. Doug's homes were always filled with wonderful art. He owned big canvases by Sue Poitras, works by Spider Jonk, photos by Wayne Goodmanson, and in the last months of his life, he bought a terrific new piece from Bob Hest, a Holly boy with a Minneapolis studio. I know I just kind of dropped this segment in the program, but visual art and artists were so important to Doug. So simply deserves mention. Now please welcome Doug's son. Charlie messed us all up. Doug's son, Ben Hamilton. I've known Ben since birth. We can all hope that in our time of need, we will have a child as kind, devoted, and caring as Ben was to his dad during his battle with AML. Ben?
Thank you, John, for that very kind introduction. My father was an incredible man and an amazing dad to me for my entire 45 years of life. I just wanted to share a couple stories about my dad growing up. One, about, I'm not exactly sure, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, my father performed in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now, I would visit my dad, and I would often see him working on whatever performance he had coming up, and he would, be poring over lines and making notes. And I asked him about this performance. I had seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show. We've all seen the film. I believe I'd seen it perform once before, and my dad was, he had the role of the narrator. And when he would talk about it, he would say, "You really have to see this performance. I'm putting a little spin on it. It's gonna have something unique. You'll wanna see this." So I had been busy with my life, and I, for whatever reason, had been putting it off and putting it off. And the final performance of the Rocky Horror Picture Show was taking place on midnight of Halloween. So I got a ticket. I went by myself. I walked into the FMCT, had an assigned seat, and looked back, and who should be sitting behind me? But I had been recently divorced, my ex-wife, her new boyfriend, and a bunch of her friends. So the performance opens, and my dad comes out as the narrator, dressed in a very nice suit, delivering his lines with, I believe, was a fine glass of scotch or something, really, really fine, nice in his hand. And throughout the performance, he began to get more and more intoxicated, his character. And his costume would become in more and more disarray. By the end of the performance, I believe, if I remember correctly, he came out in his boxers with 240s taped to his hands. I wish he would have given me a heads up. I had, as John mentioned, I had an opportunity to spend some incredible time with my dad over this last year and a half, and I really cannot be more grateful. I have gotten to know my father as a person more in the last year and a half than in my entire life. It's been an incredible experience. He lived with me for several months, and it's been amazing. He also, I found out that he was just an incredibly well-organized hoarder. He saved every single, if there was a pin from an event or a letter or a bauble, he has absolutely every tape he took, every photograph he took, everything dating back to his childhood. It's incredible. And I mean, I'm talking, there are boxes and boxes and boxes of letters and material. I will be getting to know my dad for the rest of my life. That's the truth. When leading up to his passing in it was about 4 or 5 days. No, it was about 3 or 4 days. He had been looking forward to being in a medical trial, and it became pretty apparent that this was probably not going to happen. To myself, I think to everybody around him, my father's spirit never wavered at all. I know my Uncle Dennis tried to speak to him a few times about it, and he would just, nope, it's not time yet. But when his doctor came to us and said, I don't feel like you're well enough for this particular trial. We'll see if things turn around. Maybe you can re-enroll, but it's just not time. That was when Dad changed his tune. He never became negative. He never became sad. He accepted his situation very quickly. It was amazing. He spoke to me. He said, started to talk about what he'd like to do for this memorial. He said, I'd like to have John Tanberg here to be the host. I'd like to keep people to 3 minutes. Good luck, John. He started going on. He said, I'd like to have MSU provide bars and stuff like that. And eventually it got to a point where I was more than happy to listen, but I stopped him and I said, Dad, you know this isn't your birthday, right? I mean, it's in celebration of you, but it's not a retirement party. You're not invited. This is our party. This is for us. And he laughed. And he said, anyway, he said, okay, I trust you. I trust all of you. Well, you'll be in good hands. And he said, just make sure that Spider's involved. Finally, the last night that we spent with him, Deb and I spent with him. So as I mentioned, pretty quickly after that, we spoke to the hospice folks, and they were ready to enter him into hospice. It was about 4 o'clock the day before he passed away, and he was not uncomfortable, but he was ready. I sat with him. We spoke to the hospice folks. I signed the paperwork, and he said, "Okay, well, you'll meet me at the hospice house in Sanford." And I said, "Yep, we'll meet you there." And so I said, I need to go home and kind of just decompress. And he called me several hours later, and he said, "All right, well, the ambulance is on its way. They're coming." And I was like, "Okay. So you guys will meet me there, right?" And I was like, "Yep." Then, we were much closer than he was to Sanford, so I figured we had a few moments. About a half an hour later, he called again, and he's like, "All right, well, the ambulance is here, but they're not ready to leave yet. I'll give you a heads up when we're leaving." And I was like, "All right." And it's weird to be in this situation, getting phone calls from my dad, and I hadn't seen his number on my caller ID for some time. About 45 minutes later, he said, "Okay, well, we're getting ready to go, so we'll see you over there, all right?" And I was like, all right. So my girlfriend Lindsay and I head over to the hospice house. We get there. Deb is there waiting. We're in this beautiful room in hospice, and it's empty. We're waiting. He's not there. And we don't know what to say. It's a very sort of uncomfortable situation. We're all very tense, and we don't really know what to do. And about 10 or 15 minutes later, we hear, it's also nighttime. It's about 9:30, 10 o'clock at this point, so it's dark in the hospice wing. And we hear the sound of wheels coming in, and Dad comes wheeled in with these 2 EMTs, and he's sitting up in the bed as they're bringing him in, and they wheel him in, and I'm like, "Is it okay if Lindsay's here?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely fine." And he gets in, and they move him over to the other bed, and it's just a lot of commotion, and we're just kind of sitting there, and we don't really know what to do, and we're kind of uncomfortable. Finally, they get him over. The EMTs leave, and there's the nurses leave, and it's just myself, Deb, and Lindsay, and we clearly don't know what to say. And Dad looks at us, and he takes the thing on his bed, and he sits himself up, and he looks at us both, and he says, "You're probably wondering why I brought you all here." It's a true story. My dad was an incredible human and an incredible man, and he's just, really believed in truth in journalism and getting the facts right, and making sure that, nothing was blown out of proportion, and he didn't get credit for something he didn't deserve. And he had given me a copy of his resume that he wanted to be used for his obituary and everything. And so he asked me after he said this, we were sitting by his bed, and he said, "What have you been doing today?" And I said, "Well, honestly, I don't know, your friends have been working on your obituary, and I just got a first draft of that." And he said, "Well, let's hear it." And I had basically had an out-of-body experience. Well, I read my dad his own obituary, and I couldn't look at him. I'm looking down at my phone while I'm reading it off the phone, and I look up, and he's like, "Well, first of all, I started in the news in 1975, not 74. And he starts dictating corrections to me while Lindsay takes notes. And he's like, "I expect that you'll get these fixed." So my dad was, words cannot describe what an absolutely incredible father he was, and what an incredibly empathetic and kind and loving man he was. And what he was to me as a father, I know he was to all of you that he knew. He touched so many individual people, and he had so many meaningful connections to so many people. Myself, as somebody that is incredibly ADHD, I cannot imagine. So I am just so grateful to have had him in my life, and to my dad, thank you so much.
You're a fine, fine son, Benjamin Lake Hamilton. Right there. Deb Dawson was Doug's chosen life partner. She gave him love, companionship, a travel partner, and warm comfort. They were simply wonderful together. Deb?
People ask me how I'm doing. I'm doing great. I got to have this man in my life for about the last 5 years and knew him longer before that as well. I was married 3 times, but Doug was a partner who was kind, respectful, loving, present, available. He was everything that I needed, everything that I'd ever dreamed of in a partner. We did travel. I mean, I got to bring him to Africa with me, so he saw the work that I was doing there. That was fantastic, and I know he loved it as well. But what I most remember is this past year. And one of the things about this past year, when he got sick, and I mean, it was prior to that, but got worse, of course, is I got sober a year ago on September 1st.
Bravo.
Yes. So I was sober for 22 years, and then Mezzaluna opened. I went there with some of the people in this room, and I had a glass of wine, and for a long time I had just one glass of wine on a Friday. The pandemic hit, and then I was out of control. My sisters, who were sitting behind me, showed up at my door one morning at like 7:30 in the morning, drove in from the lakes and said, "Pack a bag, we're taking you to detox and then to treatment." So I packed a bag and I got in the car and I said, "Well, how did you know I'm drinking too much?" "Well, you call us on the phone when you're drunk." So apparently I got friendly at that time. So, you know, I went there and it was a really good experience, and I was sober for a while when I got home. And then, you know, then I wasn't. And then I was drinking too much again. So in August last year, I thought, you know, I better go back there. So I went back and stayed for a month, and at the end of that month, I thought, you know, I was already here for a month. I should stay for another month. So I stayed for a second month, and I have had no desire to drink since then. I still have no desire to drink. And what changed for me was being able to be fully present for Doug this past year. You know, to handle the things that need to be handled, to handle my own emotions, and AA is helpful with all those kinds of things. So it's a blessing that I became sober, that I remained sober. I intend to continue to be sober the rest of my life. I am so grateful to have had that time with Doug Wirth. And he quit drinking when I quit drinking. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he quit drinking to support me. And so I had that time with him, with my mind clear, and he was fully present and I was fully present, and I will never forget it. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Oh, well, what the hell? And now, the gifted Hamilton brothers. As you may know, Doug was not the only accomplished Hamilton. There are 3 brothers, and you'll hear from 2 of them today. The oldest brother, Roger King Hamilton, is in the audience. Dennis Hamilton, the oldest younger brother, had a terrific career at Minnesota Public Radio and has become, in retirement, a terrific artist in woodworking. Dennis?
Oh boy, gotta pull my pants up. What you also don't know is that I'm wearing new shoes thanks to Sherry, so if I limp off stage, you'll know why. What Ben didn't tell you about the obituary was that I got a text from him about 2 days before he passed saying, Doug wants you to write his obituary. And I'm thinking, why the hell didn't Doug write his own obituary? And then he sends me a 7-page resume, single-spaced. So anyway, Pat and I missed being here by just hours the day he passed, and the saving bit of that was that Ben told me that he and Lindsay and Deb had been able to be with him that night before, and that Ben had read him the obituary, and he had edited it. Thank God. So take a look at that picture. He has an awfully big head, doesn't he? See, it's like 6 pieces of siding versus about 5. I think maybe he may have been from outer space. But the true thing about it is that there are 3 people in this audience, Pat, wherever you are, there you are, King, and me, who've known Doug longer than anybody. King told me a while back, he said, I just can't find the words. And that's a true and honest thing. And we know that he's in your heart forever, just like he is the rest of us. When I was about 3.5, about the time that picture was taken, I discovered that Doug had a superpower. And this may shock and amuse you. I hope both. Not even Sherry knows what I'm going to say next. When he was that age, he could make himself fart. I'm not kidding you. I mean, talk about mad skills. Geez, not even Superman could do that, and I checked the comics. We shared a bedroom at 1131 Roosevelt Avenue. In fact, we shared a bedroom almost all through college, and at this age, he would demonstrate this prowess mostly at night after we'd gone to bed. And you can imagine, how entertaining that was. And Mom and Dad had the room next door. Not so entertaining to them, because my peals of laughter would kind of interrupt their wanting to fall asleep. So one night, Mom showed up, and she was not amused. And she suggested that this behavior stop. Doug being Doug, after she left the room, let go a couple more. Then she came back. And that was the end of that. Just imagine, however, if the next day the phone had rang and Mom picked it up and said, Mrs. Hamilton, this is America's Got Talent. Feature in Life magazine, touring with major orchestras, whole different career path. Okay. Got through that. I've been worried about that for months. Not months, but anyway. Doug taught me how to tie my shoes. I was sitting on the steps going up to the second floor in our house on Roosevelt Avenue, And I remember looking down through my knees while he worked on these hand-me-down Buster Browns. And I got it eventually. But that was about the only time I ever looked down. The other rest of my life, I was looking up at him. He was just an amazing younger brother, older brother, oldest or older brother, I guess I should say. He was really smart. And, you know, he had a microscope by the time he was 9 years old. And he would get water, we'd get water from the Pelican River, and, you know, he'd save his allowance to buy these slides that had wells in them. And we would look at amoebas and hydras and all kinds of interesting stuff, and he would teach me about it. He got a rock hammer once for his birthday, and we spent that summer down by the railroad tracks near Pelican River breaking open pieces of granite looking for garnets. We were going to be rich. And then there were the trips to the Carnegie Library in Detroit Lakes, and he'd go to the adult section at, you know, 9, 10, or 11, I'd go to the kids section. And we were the son of a newspaper man. Dad was co-publisher of the Becker County Record in Detroit Lakes before he came here to Moorhead State University, or Minnesota State University, Moorhead. And so we had access to big sheets of paper. And Doug took one of those once and put it on the floor in our bedroom, and over the course of about a week, drew to perfect scale a 2-man submarine. And I mean, it was to perfect scale. And Ben, those plans may be somewhere in the box that you'll discover when you're about 65, when you get down to that layer. Anyway, so he wrote a contract, and we went to Dad and said, you know, no presents for 3 Christmases if you finance this construction. And you may think, you know, that's sort of crazy, but our oldest brother King was building a hydroplane in the basement about the same time and managed to get it out within about 1/4 of an eighth of an inch, I think. You know, it was tight. But the submarine never happened because as Christmas got closer, you can imagine, we have done what? Okay. He was an A+ student, outgoing, almost never did homework, often did homework for others. And Ben, you're like your dad in every way. Except the homework part. Well, yeah. All right. I mean, you're about 3 speeds faster, but you look like him. You have his sense of humor. You love a good story. Your enthusiasm for being with others is obvious. You're loyal to your friends. You love solving your own problems and helping others with theirs. You're dedicated to your community. You're generous. And in a way, your dad became you, and you him the second you took a breath. You have no idea how that changed him. And now with Lindsay, you're a formidable couple. Amazing. Thank you, Lindsay, for hanging on to that guy. He needs somebody to hold him down now and again. So thank you, Ben, for being with your dad all that time. Not only when you were young and jealous that others were taking his time at the state fair or someplace where he would have patience talking to just about anybody and you wanted his attention. He was, and we are very proud of you. And Deb, he loved you. I mean, he just That's all I can say. And then you had wonderful adventures together. I mean, he had a lifelong lust for travel, and here you are going to Africa more than once. He admired the work that you did with your nonprofit. He loved being in your life, and his family is so grateful for your care. He took refuge. You held his hand through very tough times. You know, trips to the emergency room, at home when he was often ill and exhausted. His family and friends, all we can do is be grateful that you called him some years ago and asked him to go out. Doug was a personality, but to his brothers, he was Doug, you know. I mean, you were listeners, viewers, friends, and audience members, but to us, you know, it's hard for me to watch him on stage. I'd sit here and watch him up on stage, and that was Doug, you know. He was a character, but it was Doug. He was absolutely dedicated to this place, this region, the people, loyal to his friends and family. He followed Dad into media with an emphasis on public service, as did King and I. Pat, not so much. I like to say that Pat heard so much about media sitting around the media table that he went into science. In fact, he embraced science. And with his wife, Jay, they're both great leaders in client science education and policy. In fact, they're both going to Egypt in November to the International Climate Summit. So that's just about it. I do want to thank you, MSUM, JT, Wayne, and Jane for being comforting voices on the other end of the phone the last months. All the speakers, musicians, and especially Spider, you're here somewhere. You were Steve Jonk when the two of us were in high school together and have been great friends over the years. And this is a production of Spider Jonk and Company in a lot of ways. There is, as to the end here, Ben was asking about this earlier, there's -30- at the end of the coda. Those of you who took journalism from Howard Benford here at Morehead State University know that that -30- means end of text. So, -30, dear brother, -30.
Next, we come to the younger brother, Patrick Hamilton. Pat is Director of Global Change at the Science Museum of Minnesota, and he is a force on the world stage in the area of climate control. He also played various impish roles as a child actor here at MSU. I remember him being carried off by Mike Kolba as Smee, and Patrick is one of the Lost Boys, and we thought we'd never see him again. Pat?
Thank you all for being here. Doug deeply loved this community, and it is deeply humbling to see that love reflected back today. During events like this, I see them as an opportunity to pause and reflect on those people that have had formative influences on our lives. And for me, with Doug, there were many formative influences. but I'm going to highlight just one. And it was June 1984. Doug was living down in the Twin Cities. He was the host of Minnesota Public Radio's Morning Edition. 18 months prior, I had been awarded my master's degree in geography at the University of Minnesota. And at that time, I was an environmental planner at the Metropolitan Council of the Twin Cities, just a few blocks away from where Doug was at NPR. But my position was temporary. I learned that there was a position opening at the Science Museum of Minnesota. I got a hold of the description. The title said, geographer. I looked at that and I said, I want this. I need this. I gave a copy of that description to Doug and I said, I want this. I need this. And I need your help. And he said, whatever you need me to do, let me know. And I said, well, what I need to do to get this job is I have to write a cover letter and a resume. And he said, those documents aren't going to get you that position. But if you do them right, they should at least get you the foot in the door. So I prepared a draft cover letter and resume and dropped them off at the front desk at NPR. And when Doug finished in the morning, he picked them up and he took them home to his apartment. And that evening after dinner, I called him and we discussed them just before he had to go to bed to get up early in the next morning for Morning Edition. And that started an iteration of his review, my revisions, review, revision, review, revision, until it was finally to his satisfaction. And so I submitted that cover letter and resume to the Science Museum. I called him a week later and I said, I've been called in for an interview. And he said, have they given you any guidance of what to expect? And I said, no, but I just assume that I'll walk in there, they'll set me down in a room and they'll pitch questions at me and I'll, try to knock them out of the park. And he said, an interview is better thought of as an audition. So think hard about that person who's going to be interviewing you, the person that you hope is going to be hiring you, the person that you want to work for. What is the role they want you to play? And then play that role to the best of your ability during that audition. Well, I called him back a week later and I said, there were 84 candidates for that position. But I got the role of geographer at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And of course, over the years, the role changed and evolved as the museum evolved and as its needs changed. But 38 years later, I'm still there as a role at the Science Museum of Minnesota. And now, my top role at the museum, as Dennis alluded to, is leading the Science Museum's multi-pronged efforts at the existential challenges of climate change. Now, I know that eventually there will be a final curtain call. But as long as I'm there in that role, I will play it to the best of my ability in honor of Doug. And so to Doug, you incredibly creative, complex creation of Stardust, thank you for your guidance in gaining me the role of a lifetime. I am going to miss you profoundly. But as long as I am alive, you will be a part of me. Goodbye for now.
Aren't they something, those Hamilton boys? Andy Thorson is well known to area music lovers. If you don't know her as a performer, you've got a treat in store. And you've already met Pat Leonards. Andy and Pat will perform I'll Be Seeing You. Please welcome Andy Thorson and Pat Leonards.
I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces. Here we go. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, and the wishing well. Well, I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, and everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
Wow. Wayne, I'm not crying because of you. It's that darn Andy and Pat. But, of course, we move on. You will know Wayne Goodmanson from his photography, his work on Prairie Public TV, his many photography books, and you will now hear from him as the other, more than 55 years, friend of Doug. Wayne?
I don't have it, sorry. Thanks. The kid from DL, one day, Mrs. Munson, my 8th grade English teacher, announced that we had a new student from Detroit Lakes who would be joining our class. The new kid had a buzz cut, kind of short and wiry,
And since my last name started with G-U, and his last name started with H-A, he was assigned the seat behind me. In spite of the civil disobedience that ensued, Mrs. Munson held fast to her ingrained sense of alphabetical seating order. I found the kid from DL to be wickedly funny, very smart, impishly playful, and very creative. We hit it off. Not long after that, we were joined by Paul Dinga, Steve Peterson, and Gary Follett, and because of our mutual disappointment and disgust with the school newspaper, we founded the underground newspaper Invictus. I had no idea what the name meant. I thought it might be a new car name or a classic comic book hero. I suspect it was the new guy who came up with the name, and then who later handed out the writing assignments. He was like that. It hit the streets, or I should say, the hallways of South Junior High. Not long after that, each of us were individually dragged down to the principal's office. Only hardened criminals were afforded such treatment. I remember Mr. Wergelin saying, "Sit down, Mr. Goodmanson. This Invictus thing is a serious business." I thought that he was on the right track with that statement, and I expected a congratulatory pat on my back. Then he said, "This will forever be a black mark on your academic career." Bullshit. I thought, and even then, we recognized it as one of our best accomplishments that we had done to date. So, Doug, my friend of nearly 60 years, I thank you for your company on our respective paths through life. My first assessment of you as being wickedly funny, very intelligent, impishly playful, and creative was spot on. But I missed one attribute that became clear with the passing of years. You trusted yourself, and you had the moxie and the talent to go after your dreams, with significant success, I might add. And how fitting that the poem Invictus by William Ernest Henry should sum up your final chapter as if it was written for you, about your courage in the face of death and your ability to hold on to your own dignity despite the indignities life placed before you. Well, now it's time to say goodbye and wish you fair winds and following seas.
As you know, Doug loved music, and he was a regular at performances in the Troll Lodge by the Moving Parts. We closed the memorial with Anshoken Farewell, performed by two members of that group, Dakota Kate Henney and Max Jonk. Dakota Kate and Max, the stage is yours.
Spider had suggested I maybe vamp a little bit going into the song, but I thought it'd be better to tune instead. Max and I have had opportunity to play a time or two play this song for Doug, and it is truly an honor to get to play it today, although as a lament, which was its original intention, I guess. So, Doug, this is for you.
The beauty of stringed instruments. There ain't nothing like it. I would like to thank all those who paid tribute in speech and song. I would like to thank MSUM and especially Elizabeth Everett Carnes, who greased the wheels for our use of this auditorium. A double especially goes to Spider Jonk, who designed the program you're holding, did the seen and unseen technical things necessary, and rounded up the Friends of Doug for this memorial. And so thank you, Spider. And as the curtain comes down, Doug, let me play your Horatio and say, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Thank you.